Hello and welcome. In today's video, I'm going to share with you the 10 best Ark creatures out there. So let's get into it. In at number 10 is the Stego, and this may seem like an odd choice for me, but in my opinion the Stego is just one of the most useful Ark creatures out there for PvP and for PvE as well. It is a great gatherer of berries and it can harvest so many berries in a short space of time. And yes, albeit it may not have the best movement speed or stamina out there, but it will still gather those berries within a quick frame of time, unlike a Trike, which sometimes can be a bit annoying, and a Parasaur, which really just doesn't gather enough berries, although they are easier tames. But the Stego isn't that bad considering it is quite slow, but all you really need to watch out for is that tail that it has, as that can be absolutely lethal to you. But it isn't that bad if you have a reasonable trap to tame the Stego, or if you're taming from a higher point. And also, if you didn't know already, the Stego had a TLC at some point, and now it has 3 different plate modes. That sharpened plate is going to be used to deal the most damage and gather the most berries. Then the heavy plate will be used to gather all that kind of wood and those kind of resources. And the hardened plate is going to be your turret soaking plate of choice. And actually, this is really great as well, as there is rider protection too from those plates, which no other turret soaker, as far as I'm concerned, has, unless you obviously have physical structures blocking, which can be really expensive and actually largely inefficient. In at number 9 is the RG, and it would not be a top 10 best Ark creatures list without the RG on that list. The RG is by far one of Ark's best creatures out there, and one of Ark's best productivity creatures which you can find throughout the game. Obviously it's not going to be useful on Arboration or Gem 1, as flyers are not allowed on that map, but for every other map that there is, the RG is going to be an absolutely insane tame which you're going to love throughout all of your Ark playing, right from the beginning when you first get an RG all the way to the far later stages of the Ark game, as this is by far your best flyer for transporting around things like metal, and it does have weight reduction on those resources too, and it can pick up a wealth of creatures as well. And it really does seem like on the RG the abilities that it has are absolutely endless, and I'm pretty sure it can even carry smaller creatures in its beak as well, for example the dodo. And also its saddle is a portable smithy, which leans even further into its metal kind of transporting ability, where obviously it can transport metal with its weight reduction, and it also can regen insanely quickly if exposed and eating a dead carcass. But just before we continue, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe, as it really does help me out. Next up we have the Snow Owl, which now, thanks to its release on the map that is Fjorda, this is accessible to every Ark player, I think, apart from Switch and mobile players. And what a creature this is, and in my opinion the Snow Owl is just a big upgrade to the RG, apart from transporting those metal resources, as obviously it does not have weight reduction on those things. But for everything else, the Snow Owl is going to be a superior flyer. It is far faster than the RG, and now thanks to ASA just not having movement speed in it when ASA comes out, you won't be able to get the RG faster than base speeds, and same with the Snow Owl, even if in Ark currently you are using the classic flyers mod, or you just turned on the option in the settings menu. So the Snow Owl is going to be a far more useful tame looking into the future of Ark, as with that glide ability it can zip across the map with insane speeds. But it isn't just great for travelling across the map really fast, it can also heat seek certain creatures, and it can just see any organism that may be hiding anywhere, which is great for PvE players if they've lost a tame, or for PvP players if they're trying to find someone who is raiding their base. But you'll also want to pump that stamina into these things, not just so they can fly longer distances, but also so they can heal up creatures, and that can be wild creatures, enemy creatures, or your own. You probably wouldn't want to heal up enemy creatures, but there's definitely some uses for healing up those wild creatures, especially if you're trying to tame one and you've shot loads of tranks into it and it's really weak. They can just quickly heal it with the snow owl and then get straight back into it, and the torpor drain will be minimal compared to waiting for absolutely ages for its health to come back up. And obviously you can see why you'd want to heal your own creatures in battle. That just goes with what your own creatures want to do. They may lose health and then you just want to heal them up again. Either way, that healing ability is going to be extremely useful. Sadly, the snow owl can't really pick up a wealth of creatures. I'm not even sure if it can pick up any creatures, but there is just one extra thing about it. If you feed owl pellets to gachas, then you'll get insane loot out of them, like loot that you haven't seen before, and it essentially just raises the chance that you'll get that higher quality loot. Definitely something to try at some point if you have some gachas. Now we have our first ocean creature, being the Basilosaurus, and in my opinion, especially if you're on Gen 1 and you have access to the X Basilosaurus, you can have yourself the best ocean creature out there. And in my opinion, the Basilosaurus is the best ocean creature. It can produce oil passively, which is extremely useful. Obviously not as useful as the moment, but it is still a very, very cool ability for a creature to have, and you know, every little helps when it comes to that. In terms of the Basilosaurus' other abilities though, this is by far the best caving underwater dino out there, and it is definitely one at some point which you should seek out to tame, and it isn't all too difficult apart from getting away from the mantas which will surround one of these things in the wild. At least I'm pretty sure they always do. Most of the times you may be able to find some without mantas, meaning you're lucky, but that manta clearing stage will be your hardest bit to tame. But after that is really just a passive tame, which is just a lot of waiting really. But the Basilosaurus does have one minor downside, which is if it goes too deep, sadly it will take damage, which no other Ark creature has, but it kind of makes sense really. Now, the Deinonychus is definitely a creature at some point which every single Ark player should be going for, and the fact that it spawns on Valguero means pretty much every Ark player has access to it, and it is obviously on a free DLC. And going into ASA again, this is going to be an extremely useful creature for traversing the map, as yes, movement speed is not going to exist again, but the Deinonychus is an extremely fast creature, which is absolutely insane for traveling around the map, and things like Thylers as well will be crucial in that Ark progress when ASA comes out, as you'll need to just find the fastest creatures out there for traveling across the map with insane speeds, and maybe the galley actually may become useful. In terms of the use of the Deinonychus, this is by far one of the best boss tames that you can find out there, and its bleed ability even works on bosses as well, and the fact that it can latch onto those bosses and then just inflict that bleed ability is an insane ability for any creature to actually have. And obviously, like I've said so many times, it is so great for traveling around the map, and it doesn't even take full damage, which is a really good thing to have, but it doesn't matter too much currently in the Ark game, as you can always just dismount just before you hit the ground, and then all that full damage will be cancelled. But I think they're going to fix that for ASA, so you may need to rely on creatures like this for getting no full damage taken, as you may not be able to just simply jump Rexes off of cliffs and then dismount just before you hit the ground, as ASA supposedly is a lot more realistic. In at number 5 is the Crystal Wyvern, and this is almost a perfect creature, and it is so close to being that creature that may even be in the number 1 spot for me, but the fact that it is unlocked at a level 65, as there is a lock for you being able to tame this thing, is a bit of a shame really, but it does kind of help with the balance of Ark, even though Ark isn't really a balanced game. But ASA is supposed to fix a lot of those issues, and maybe that level 65 barrier may be removed, or it will just make a lot more sense once ASA is released, as the creature balance is supposedly going to be a lot better. In terms of the Wyvern's use, in terms of the Crystal Wyvern's use, it is basically just like a normal Wyvern, but significantly easier to tame, and in my opinion just a lot better to tame than the Wyvern, as it is just so much more accessible, and in some ways the Blood Crystal Wyvern is just better than any other Wyvern out there, and they're pretty much the same in most things. They may be a little bit weaker, but in terms of their movement, which again is going to be extremely useful coming into ASA, the Wyverns are really fast flyers, if you didn't know already, and just in terms of their damage as well, they will still pack that punch, and if only they could be unlocked as soon as you could get that food, which is the crystal that you'll find on Crystal Isles to unlock them, these would probably be the perfect Ark Tame, but again, it all comes down to Ark's game balance. Right, the Shadowmane, and this is by far one of Ark's most used creatures at the moment, and it is one of the most densely packed creatures in terms of abilities, and the Shadowmane is definitely one that on Fjorda you should tame, and on Gen 2 if you have that as well. If you have Gen 2, tame it on Gen 2 first, as I always like taming creatures on the original map that they came on. In terms of their abilities, they can stun creatures, they can charge up their damage, they can turn invisible, they can jump to great heights, they have the hydration buff, they have the pack buff. There's just so many things going on with the Shadowmane, and on top of that they have great mobility and speed as well, and I feel like I keep going on about it so much, but this is going to be extremely useful for ASA once movement speed is removed. And again, they're great in water as well. They're very quick, very fast and agile swimmers, but sadly their only real downside is that taming method of theirs, which can be a drag at the best of times and can be one of the most infuriating things at the worst. At least it isn't as bad to tame as the Armaga. In at number 3 is the Maewing, and this is again another Gen 2 Ark Tame, and one which I urge many of you to go out and tame yourself, especially considering they are on Fjorda as well. And these creatures are by far one of the best travel mounts you'll find out there, and their speed is immense. Again, that is going to be really useful for ASA, and they are one of Gen 2's more balanced tames, as they aren't too densely packed with abilities, but they are still very useful tames, and their level that you'll be taming one of these things does actually make quite a lot of sense. But obviously they're not just great for traveling and gliding around the map with insane speeds, these are also really great kind of breeders and assists of breeders, like the Super Nanny on S+. This isn't going to imprint your dinos though, this is just going to act as a feeding trough where you don't need to chuck loads of food into it, which can make breeding a lot easier, and the fact that you can store baby creatures in the saddle of this thing, which really does not make sense in terms of the scale, but will go along with it, it really makes breeding so much simpler. If you want a quick berry gatherer as well, if you belly flop onto bushes, you'll gather yourself some berries too. And for hexagons, these things are great as there are many Maewing race missions. In at number 2 is the Velonasaur. Now loads of you may be wondering, why am I putting this creature so high on the list? And I really think, especially with the Velonasaur now on Gen 2, which I think may be on Fjorda as well, but either way it is on Gen 2 if you have that, and it is definitely accessible on not just DLC maps. And in terms of the Velonasaur's abilities, this thing is by far the best kind of little combat creature which you can come across. It is essentially just a portable turret which can absolutely wreck and destroy creatures in PvE and in PvP too, and it's just such a useful and really cool design for a creature which I really enjoy. And again, it is a reasonably quick creature as well, which will come in useful for ASA. I really feel like I'm saying that so much. Sorry if me saying that over and over again is boring you. In terms of their use, these are obviously just really great turrets. They're really great for traveling around again with that great speed, and they're just great tanks for just getting around everywhere, and they're actually okay in terms of their weight stat as well, so it's not too bad for gathering around resources too. And these will be one of your best pals through all of your Ark experiences. They're very simple and very easy tames, which will take you very far in Ark. But before we get into number 1, we have a couple of honourable mentions. And finally, in at number 1, we have the Desmodus Draculae. Now, this thing first spawned on Fjorda and is definitely a very, very recent Ark creature, and one which would especially become extremely useful in ASA, again, for its speed. But also the fact that this thing can produce Sanguine Elixir, which is an absolute taming hack, and it will become essential in ASA, as ASA is also supposed to be a harder game, and this creature will be extremely sought out for. And again, it does have that glide ability like the Snow Owl, making this thing a really fast creature which can zip across the map. And taming one isn't actually the worst thing ever. Those blood bags may be a little bit hard to get, but taming a low level at first isn't going to be the worst thing that you have ever encountered. It may take a few tries, but taming a Rex, in my opinion, is a little bit harder than taming maybe like a level 5 Desmodus, which will definitely get you by in the early games of Ark. As compared to a Pteranodon, their stats are significantly better. The only real downside is the saddle level. But anyway, that was the end of today's video, and do you agree? If you don't, comment down your top 10 favourite Ark Tames in the comments down below, as I always love to hear your thoughts, and I will see you all later.